Shush. When you see a college girl prancing around in front of you half naked, you do not yell out my name.
Well, you were being a peeping Tom.
Voyeurism is a recurring theme in horror cinema. It is evident directly in plot lines and indirectly in filmmaking technique. One of the most obvious horror films focusing on this topic is Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock. I've covered this film plenty in previous episodes, so I'll just leave you with the obvious voyeur theme of Norman Bates spying on Marion Crane. Right around the same time, another landmark horror film about voyeurism came out. It was a British take on much of the same psychosis seen in the Hitchcock film. But while Psycho was a worldwide hit, Peeping Tom was the film that killed the career of celebrated director Michael Powell. Powell had, along with frequent collaborator Emmerich Pressburger, made some of Britain's finest films, including milestone classics like The Red Shoes, Black Narcissus, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, and the endlessly charming I Know Where I'm Going. After their partnership ended, Powell wanted to explore some seedier, less classy themes. Peeping Tom follows a young aspiring filmmaker, Mark, who begins shooting nasty little short films of women. Oh, and yeah, he puts a spike on the front of his camera, capturing himself impaling these women, murdering them, on film. British critics were not amused, and they decided to punish Michael Powell with such an uproarious overreaction that Powell's career tanked. He had to go to Australia and Spain to make more movies. I'll give the critics this. Peeping Tom is a vehemently nasty film that is to this day shockingly unpleasant to watch. But that doesn't mean it's a bad film. It really isn't. Peeping Tom just wasn't polite enough for the British. I bet Hitchcock was glad he'd emigrated to the United States to make movies. You know, that country that thrived on pushing audience expectations with violence, and sex, and showing toilets on screen. The British weren't having it. No sex please, and no violence. Ironically, British cinema would become highly violent with Hammer films right around the same time as Peeping Tom came out. The freewheeling gore spread like a virus, and Hammer themselves were soon totally outcompeted by later so-called video nasties from places like Italy and France. So why did the British critics react so poorly to Peeping Tom? Perhaps because the film was a reflection of the ideals of voyeurism, and that voyeurism is a major tenet of cinema. Think about it. Cinema is an act of voyeurism by an audience. We watch movies, inserting ourselves into the lives of characters. We enjoy it when John McClane kills bad guys. We get involved in the deep emotions of Roy Batty dying. We savor the power of superheroes by joining them on both light and dark journeys. And we're excited when Sharon Stone uncrosses her legs. Or at least half the audience is. Though nowadays, there's finally plenty of arousing content for the other half as well. Cinema is an act of voyeurism, and Peeping Tom puts us in the point of view of the voyeur. But because the film is revolting, on purpose, making us truly connect with the nauseating and sick mentality of its lead character, we are confronted with the idea of feeling the kill, instead of casually watching it from a distance. By putting audiences in the killer's perspective, but refusing to make him charming, Michael Powell made his audience discomforted, and the critics punished him for it. But following Peeping Tom, the concept of voyeurism was enhanced in cinema, and the power of voyeurism was headlined, not just in stories, but also in filmmaking technique. We soon got killer cam view. In Jaws, the opening credit have us follow the shark's point of view as it stalks its prey. But we can't really relate to the shark. Director Steven Spielberg uses the point of view camera to create ominous tension, rather than to get us inside the shark's head. Though it should be pointed out, this storytelling trick had been used before. Points of view had been seen several times in the past, including in the silent era, like in this sample from Metropolis. Going back to the dawn of cinema history, some of the most popular films were point-of-view travel films, where cameras were mounted on the fronts of trains, like this sample from the early days of the New York subway. The POV shot was also used extensively in Robert Mamoulian's 1931 adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, one of the first horror films to adopt this storytelling trick. Then, in 1946, director Robert Florey used a killer point of view literally in the murder scene in The Beast with Five Fingers. Some movies took this further, like these two noir films. Lady in the Lake is told exclusively through a first-person point of view, and the Humphrey Bogart vehicle, Dark Passage, used the trick through the first half of the film. Bolstered by this history of camera trickery, and adding the sense of revulsion felt in Peeping Tom, the style culminated in Halloween. Through the entire opening scene, brilliantly realized by director John Carpenter, we see Michael Myers murder his older sister. Despite all previous history, from Jekyll and Hyde to Black Christmas, I'd argue that it was Halloween that opened the floodgates, and voyeurism was now both a storytelling trope and a technical trope in countless horror films that followed. Sometimes we took the killer's point of view, and sometimes, like in Cannibal Holocaust, we watched events unfold through rediscovered footage. In this film, one of the first of its kind, the footage is shown to us through a framing device, basically a story that bookends the footage by having new characters discuss and watch found footage. And as they watch it, we get to watch it with them. The concept gave the horror a sense of realism, and Cannibal Holocaust tried everything for realism, including actually slaughtering live animals for a cheap thrill. The Italian filmmakers were even put on trial in their home country, suspected of having actually murdered a human. They had to prove this bit was fake and that the actor was still alive. But I don't feel too much sympathy for these filmmakers. Despite the film actually being a genuinely good yet invidious picture, I simply cannot make excuses for anyone that would murder real animals on screen. There's a difference between killing for food or hunting, and killing for entertainment or to get one's rocks off. But that's another discussion for another day. What's really interesting about the idea of voyeurism in horror cinema is that it grew from the point of view footage in Peeping Tom and the found footage in Cannibal Holocaust, shaping it into a new subgenre of horror. Found footage.
I just want to apologize to Mike's mom.
With the immense success of the Blair Witch Project in 1999, we were invited into footage that was marketed as being real, and the illusion was further enhanced by the idea of voyeurism. We were watching private amateur footage. We were watching real people. Of course, the Blair Witch Project wasn't actually real, despite the producers marketing it as such. But the gimmick worked. The film was a major hit. Found footage was further cemented as a highly profitable genre with the 2009 wide release of Paranormal Activity. The film again felt intimate. We were watching the private lives of an unfortunate haunted couple.
What?
The idea of voyeuristically taking part in real footage was exploited in several found footage films, so much so that it eventually killed the fad, and audiences soon returned to the more normalized voyeurism of consuming regular cinema, though frankly it remains a voyeuristic medium. In some films, more than in others. Most of cinema does its voyeurism with style and panache. Brian De Palma made a career out of it, and also out of imitating that major voyeur Alfred Hitchcock and others. Other filmmakers used voyeurism in their own specific ways, some exploring it as a way to instill the fear of being hunted. For instance, Andrew Niccol delved into the voyeur theme several times throughout his sci-fi heavy filmography. This includes the excellent Gattaca, where society knows everything about your medical history. or Good Kill, where soldiers watch the enemy from above, or Anon, where cops can intrude on people's most intimate secrets. Hell, Nichols' big break was writing the screenplay for The Truman Show. Voyeurism is a fantastic theme for horror cinema, and cinema in general, because the times we live in are certainly not far off from the Orwellian nightmare we were warned about. We live in a world of cameras, in a world where people broadcast everything from their sex lives to the murders they plan to commit, even to their own reflections on cinema and voyeurism in video essays such as this. But I most prefer cinematic voyeurism in sci-fi settings, where Big Brother is personified, or in horror settings, where the subject is explored in far more films than I've been able to cover here. Because being watched is a primal fear, and in this digital world, born of cameras and born of cinema, somebody is always watching.
You are hopeless. Do you know that? You're hopeless.
She didn't come up yet.
My name is Wolfcraft. This is History of Horror. If you liked the episode, I'd sure appreciate a like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you want to check out some of my other works, I'm an author. My science fiction novel, God of Desolation, is currently available on Amazon, and my upcoming mystery novel, Richly Drawn, will soon be available on inkshares.com. Thanks aplenty.